What if the journey through it all is what makes you unstoppable? Welcome to Love, Heal, Hustle, a space for the ones who are rising, rebuilding, and reclaiming their joy. It's raw, it's real, and it's proof that healing doesn't mean slowing down. It means showing up stronger. Tap follow, hit subscribe, and listen on every major platform. Let's grow, glow, and hustle together. Welcome back to another episode of Love, Heal, Hustle. Today, I am joined by Sheila, a passionate marriage and relationship therapist who I've known for over a decade now. And we were actually first-time moms together. So welcome to the show, Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I've known Isaura for 10 plus years on and off. I am Sheila. I am a marriage and family therapist in New York and Jersey. I work with a lot of couples and relationships. I have a huge passion for them, particularly working with first generation Latinos, but overall first generation. Doesn't matter if you're immigrant or you're the first in your family to like make a certain amount of money, if you're the first to buy a home or to move somewhere else. So I really like to focus on like that first experience and how relationships just shape that. So that's kind of who I am.
I love that. And I love what you do.
Thank you.
So Sheila, I think that we can all agree, whether we're in a relationship or searching for one, at the end of the day, we all want a healthy and stable and real relationship. So let's start with the basics, the foundations of love. And I know you spoke to me a little bit about I think it's called the 3 pillars of a healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. We can name them the 3 pillars, but I would say I don't like to like label certain things. I just say foundation for how I've experienced working with couples, how I've experienced my own personal romantic relationship as well. The first one I always say is friendship. We forget how important friendship is in general with the people we care about and who are important to us, but definitely in our romantic relationships. Why? Because with the friends, no matter what they bring to us, we, for the most part, right, we're respectful, we're kind, we're compassionate. We can use humor and like joke around and stuff. So that is one thing that's always important, right? The
friendship
second
at the core.
Yes, friendship at the core. Genuinely like liking your person, right? Maybe not certain experiences with them because it happens, but that friendship at its core is super important.
And I also feel like when you build a relationship based off friendship, it's more natural rather than like you just like courting someone. I just feel like it unfolds, just you're in your natural self and I'm in my natural self, and just things just unfold naturally rather than like feeling that pressure of like we're on a date and this is what I want and this is what you want. It's like we can sit here and say what you want, what I want until we turn blue, but until we don't put that relationship into play, we're not really going to see if we're an actual fit. Where in friendship, I feel like it's less pressure.
Yeah, it allows you to see the human that's in front of you that you're getting to know. And this is something that I talk to a lot of my clients, like my individuals who are in the dating world, is if we're going into dating with the purpose of finding someone and to commit, you're completely like ignoring your actual experience in dating to getting to know just a human being. And you continue dating and then you get to see like what you like, what you don't. Well, maybe you thought you didn't like and you actually do, or vice versa. So the friendship, again, allows you to be human, like you said, and authentic, but it really allows you to just be kind and compassionate. That I sometimes see a lot of that missing in long-term relationships when like conflict arises. It's like you against I, versus like if this was a friend telling me this issue, how would I approach it, right? So that's why for me, friendship is so important.
Yeah, and I think I've learned that the hard way. I definitely learned that the hard way. How do trust, responsibility, and emotional safety show up in a healthy relationship?
That's a loaded question. Let's break it down.
Or in a healthy love.
Let's use the first part. So you said trust and what again?
Responsibility.
How does trust and responsibility
and emotional safety show up in a healthy love?
Well, trust and responsibility. So I don't believe trust exists if we're not responsible for our actions and our behaviors and how we show up in a relationship, right? So when a relationship, that's why going back to friendship, that friendship part is so important because that's how you're learning, is this person reliable? Are they trustworthy? The same way if you ask a friend, hey, can you do me this favor because I have this event? And they say yes, right? You're trusting that they're going to complete the task and show up to your event or whatever the thing is, right? And it's the same thing with our partners. We start to build that, which means if at any point, because we're human and we messed up, can we say, hey, I can see how you couldn't rely on me, right? Or I hurt you, right? Or, you know, this thing didn't feel right for you. Like that responsibility is so important because
then that gives you that emotional safety too
yes,
at the same time.
Because by taking responsibility and say, hey, not only I'm sorry, we can talk about apologies down the line, but saying, hey, I can see how that really hurt you.
Feeling heard and understood, like
exactly.
Feeling seen. Which is, something that we want to talk about later on down the line, which stems from like not being seen and heard, as a child. So
yes,
we'll get that.
But acknowledgement, validation, right, is needed so much, which goes again hand in hand with the trust building and responsibility for each person. So you or the other person in the relationship as well.
And now, how can couples build a foundation that lasts beyond that honeymoon phase? Because I feel like in the beginning, things are always so like you see all the positives, you ignore all the red flags and just focus on the green flags. And you're like in this bubble and you're so in love. But how do we maintain that? And do you think that the honeymoon phase is not necessarily, how can I say this? Is it part of like a trauma response too at the same time? Having those huge honeymoon phases and like those fantasies and relationships?
I don't think so. I think as depending on, and we can get specific on gender, right? Social norms, cultural norms. Like women are fed a certain story, right? Are taught a certain story growing up of like tu príncipe azul, right? You're like your Prince Charming.
These movies don't help.
No, I mean Disney. I'm telling you,
they ruin us from a very young age.
The subliminal messages are insane.
These Prince Charmings that we kept seeing, and like we expected them to be in the real world.
Yeah, and they are just not in that way, right? But I don't want to say yes or no because I don't believe in binary and this or that. I believe in the both and, which means that, yes, there are past experiences in your family, in your culture, et cetera, gender, like I was saying. And also, the reality is when we first meet someone and you're attracted, right? If that's physically to them.
The lust.
Yeah, the lust. But then also like intellectually, because you can just meet someone, I don't know, at a bar or at a gathering and then start talking to them and like automatically feel attracted. And that brings something in you, right? That's kind of the oxytocin, that love hormone that comes up for us, which usually also happens like when a woman gives birth, right, et cetera, with their child. But that happens. And then there's dopamine, which is the neurons in our brain as well, that the feel-good hormone, right? So the honeymoon stage is kind of when you first have a drug.
Yeah.
And then eventually you're like, I need more because the tolerance is higher. That's what it is in the beginning,
that's a
right?
Great way to put it.
So we all experience some sort of honeymoon stage, right? When we're dating someone or romantically involved. And then what happens, that dies out because eventually we fall into a routine, right? If that's either the sex that we're having, if that's the type of outings we're doing, the activities, the questions, right? The conversations.
Also, I feel like we stop impressing, like trying to impress one another too. I feel like that's also part of, one of the reasons why the honey phase dies out, because we just stop putting in the energy that we were originally giving it in the beginning. In the beginning we're so like high on this drug.
But I would question that impression because then that sounds like performing. I need to perform for you to like me. And too often people go into dating to perform. But if you go originally, like when we started.
That goes into like narcissistic traits, right?
I mean, I would.
A little bit deeper
I don't
than
really
that?
like to use that language because, and we
I
can
know.
kind of talk about some of like these terminologies.
I know it's thrown around a lot. I know.
Yeah, especially used from folks who aren't like clinically trained, and even I don't like to use it because I'm not trained in like personality disorders or more in that way, right? But yeah, we can talk about that aspect. But I want to say performance is not only turning into those type of traits, but it's rooted into what you're saying, passive and traumas, because it's like I have to perform for you to like me, which means then I'll feel like I belong or I'm worthy of it. So then what happens if that continues on, then this person is going to have a lot of anxiety because they can be authentic. They can be weird or quirky, let's say, if they want to. They feel like they have to constantly be like, all button up.
Put together.
So honeymoon stage, yes. It can be performative, which is not the best because then we see once you get into a routine. But again, like the dopamine, that feel good in the beginning because it's something new, it dies out because eventually we fall into a routine, right? Once you're dating for a few months, you start to know like, oh, we only hang out on Fridays, right? Or like you come to my house or we usually go out to dinner, right? After work. So it becomes a routine. And then once we establish routines, you start to see people get comfortable. And then you start to acknowledge like, oh, I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he chewed like that. Or I didn't know he spoke, so much on the phone with his mom and like it would always interrupt, right? So you start to observe certain things and I wouldn't necessarily call them red flags.
Things that you weren't necessarily paying attention to.
Exactly. And being curious to it because, again, these terms are thrown around and I'm like...
I know.
Yes, we can talk about them, but a lot of the times there aren't red flags. These are just very appropriate human behaviors. And if we are curious and then learn how to have a conversation about these things with the person you're dating, then relationships will just be so much more different.
It doesn't help that everyone on social media is like giving these type of advices and they're not certified and people are listening to it.
Please don't listen to these influencers who are like love bombing and gaslighting. Gaslighting is a word that I hear so much and
So let's talk about that actually. Gaslighting. What is that term? Because for the viewers that don't know what gaslighting is.
I might not be giving you the exact definition of how you would see in a definition.
In your words.
But gaslighting is really when someone is trying to alter your reality for control, for abuse, right? And this is a consistent behavior of, no, you're the one always doing that. I would never, right? But it's literally altering
making you question your reality.
Yeah, right? But manipulation, we all manipulate. We're moms. Our kids do it all the time, right? And anyone who's a parent or who's worked with kids before, they can say like, oh, this kid is manipulating to get their way. Yeah, because that is their way of adapting to the world, which means even as we become adults, we still do it because you want what you want, right? Like hustle, which means we're going to manipulate to a certain extent. And depending the context, we might not view it that way. But it's appropriate. Again, we're going to do this as humans. But it becomes then gaslighting when it's a constant way, again, to control, to abuse, right? And to really alter the person's reality and to never take responsibility because they're not, right? Like they never do wrong. We all do wrong, right?
Yeah.
Our intention is not to hurt, but sometimes, again, because our own fears and our own experiences, we end up hurting even the people we love and we care about. But can we acknowledge that? This is where we go into like narcissists, right? And there's even more when it comes to the actual clinical diagnosis. But I really want to just debunk that. Like, we all manipulate, right? We all can fast say maybe I love you early on, again, because of these things that I shared, right? The performative piece. But it doesn't mean they're love bombing you, that they're a narcissist, or that they are gaslighting, which is why we have to be careful of where we're getting this information. And at least do our own research. Just because someone is saying it, I hope, and this is where my own thoughts of social media and like critical thinking skills, go search, right? Google, whatever, do some research on what the actual term, and then say like, does this apply maybe in the context that I've been using it in? Or how I see maybe my partner or like someone close to me.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. Makes sense. So I want to get into healing and cycles. And I think so many of us underestimate how much of our past shapes our present and those unhealed traumas that tend to show up in our adulthood and in our relationships. Why do you think so many of us repeat the same toxic cycles even when we know they're not good for us?
That's a loaded question. But to start off is, I'll give some like what family systems theory is, right? So I'm a trained licensed marriage and family therapist, which when anyone's looking for a therapist, usually wants someone to help you with like depression, anxiety, right? And yeah, we can work through that. But our training is focused on like, how are these systems impacting your experience? And systems just mean like relationships, right? So it's the relationship with your family, your community, your culture, right? The country you live in, it kind of just goes in layers, right? Similar to like the ecosystem, right? The solar system, we're part of a system, even if we want to or not, right? We're born into our family, which is our family system. That's our first love classroom, right? And I learned this terminology from a great marriage and family therapist, Alexandra Solomon. She's amazing.
Gotta look into her.
Yeah, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. She teaches, I think it's in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. But point is that our family, they're the first people that we learn to be in relationships with. We learn how to love or not, right? We learn how to be emotional beings or not. That's where we learn how to trust, how to take responsibility, how to build friendships, right? How to show affection, care, kindness, compassion, like all of these, essentially these topics we've been so far discussing, we learn with our family. And of course, there's other caregivers too, right? Because if there's aunts and uncles, et cetera, and then once that child starts school, then that system also becomes part.
Contributes.
Exactly. Yeah. And then as that child becomes a teen, right, then there's friends and then into adulthood. So what happens is we learn as children, as young, adolescents, this is the way that I will be loved. The way might not be as effective, right?
Depending what they were taught.
Exactly.
Right? So that's when it all trickles down.
So then it trickles down because going back to the performance piece, if I had to perform to get, oh my gosh, Sheila, you did so great, right?
That
validation as a child, most likely I'm going to repeat that into dating because...
We all want validation.
We all. It's a human need.
We all want... I feel people be like, I don't need validation. Yes, we all need validation.
We're relational beings.
Right. It's just how you're taught that validation. How do you consume that validation? How you were taught. You know what I mean? And like you said, some people are taught that the only way that they get validated and they get that positive insight or even attention is through performance.
Which is why I'm very careful when it comes to kids and like athletes and like high achieving kids, because yes, your kid can be smart and great at all of these things, but when there's that pressure, because they're still a child, we have to think like their brain is not fully developed. So they still want to play and just be a kid and like goof around. But when that kid is constantly like, I have to be the A athlete or I have to have the A++.
There's something there.
There's something there, which means that's going to also shape their identity when it comes to being in relationships. Like I have to be the best of the best to be loved. And then that manifests in so many different ways, right? As we get older and into our professional lives, right? We've seen that, hyper-independent, high-achieving women.
Hyper-independency, yeah, that's something I personally struggle with.
Every first generation Latina, is hyper-independent. I am one of them.
My mother is the same. I mean,
we've had to.
My mother is the same. Exactly. They're in survival. That was passed on to me in a different way, of course, because,
Yeah. And then it's our job once we recognize it. So going back to your question, like, why do we continue repeating is we can see it, but what do we want to do? Like, what is it that we want to do to make a change if it's something that we don't like?
But also it's because I feel like the reason why we repeat those cycles is because it's all we know. So it's kind of like comforting at the same time. And it's like, even though it's not good for you, it's still all you know, it's still comforting to you.
Oh yeah, we can normalize chaos.
Yeah.
Anything can be a norm, even if it's, which is, right, I think the complexities of just allowing to learn difference in between people, going back to couples, right? Like you might, experience something in the relationship or think that this is appropriate in your partner not, but can we be curious as to how come and what shaped your partner's experience to think in that way and vice versa? So again, going back to that is like, We normalize the chaos or the dysfunction or the toxicity. But once we recognize that it's not okay, what are we willing to do?
Do about it.
Right? Are we willing to get help? Right? And yes, I'm a therapist and I'm all for therapy, but I don't think it's the only way, right? There's so many tools, right? And areas to be able to develop and grow and learn in a different capacity. But yeah, are you willing to get the support and acknowledge?
Yeah.
Or are you willing to stay in the comfort and continue to just choose the suffering?
Because some people are just not ready to do that work. You know?
But I have mixed feelings about ready and being willing, because I don't think we're ever ready for most things.
That's very
true. But are
true.
we willing?
Very
because
true.
once you're in it, then you get to get to decide the intensity, right? Like, am I going to go full ham into this, or am I going to like test it out? And I say, because this is what I see. I have many long-term clients that I've been working for 5 years almost at this point, right? With some individuals, 3 years, 2 years. So, and I've been able to see like, when was there a certain shift when my clients started to say like, okay, now I'm really ready to open up this backpack versus just opening up the little pocket?
Is there like an age gap? Is there like an age where we say like, you know, I need to get this help? I feel like from what I've seen, or I guess maybe the people around me, it's usually in your 30s. Is there like a common age for that you feel like the people realize, okay, you know what? I keep repeating these same cycles. It's time for me to like see where is, you know.
It's interesting because they do say, and I see, yes.
Because in your 20s, you're not.
I have a handful of Gen Z clients that I'm like.
But Gen Z is a whole different, let me tell you, Gen Z has like a level of emotional intelligence that not even millennials have.
I mean, we're like the
cusp.
We're in the middle, actually, because we're between...
I think we cracked the door, but they like kicked it open, you know?
Our generation, like, it's a lot because we have either boomer or like Gen X.
Raised by...
Exactly. And then we have the Gen Zs, but then we're doing work, right? We're still kind of part of here and here. So we're in the between like generation that is just a lot.
Yeah.
So we're doing amazing.
We're doing good. Yeah, especially as Latinas, I think, too. And speaking out on mental health awareness, I feel like millennials are doing a great job on speaking on it. I see more Latina therapists. I was talking to Melissa a few weeks ago about that, and I love that. You know, you're Dominican, you know. I've never, ever met a Dominican therapist, you know, so that's amazing. So I love to see
if you're interested in working with a Dominican therapist, I'm also bilingual, so we can definitely work together as long as you're in New York and New Jersey. Right? And it's important, right? I'm going to go back to the question, but it's important, especially when you start your healing journey, no matter, again, if it's through therapy, if it's, you know, through community, if it's through your faith, if it's spirituality, right? Mentorship, coaching, being able to find someone that you can build a relationship with. And I say that because this is the person who is going to support and guide you in your most vulnerable moments. Like,
and that you're saying that in the context of any type of person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a partner, but just
if it's your individual, right, journey, if you're trying to do it in a relational way with your partner, if you're trying to do it with a family member, let's say if you want to do family therapy or any type of, being able to work with someone who you can create that trusting, safe, because you're going to be in your most vulnerable moments, right? Which is why for me it's so important in focusing with the population that I work with, because we haven't had that. We don't trust, right?
No.
We've been part of oppressed and we continue to be oppressed, right? Being women of color, right? Being immigrants, right? Socioeconomic, not having, like all of that. So I started compassion therapy. I was intentional in saying compasión. So people are like, compassion. No, compassion therapy, because I really wanted to bring a space that was not only cultural, affirmative, but diverse, right? I also work with like LGBTQ plus couples, right? And individuals. So just a space for just folks who've been part of oppressed, right? Systems and marginalized communities to know that they can feel safe, right? And I've had clients who reach out like, oh, yeah, I wanted to work with you because you had curly hair, right? Because that's a whole other thing in our community, right? But bringing that and also acknowledging that, again, it's a relationship that you're building. So you want someone that you're going to feel comfortable with, but that you can also laugh with, right? And like kiki for like 2 seconds, because it's all part of the healing process, right? So...
And I love that
And we
we
can go
have
into
that
this space of
and
therapy
I
too.
love that we have that opportunity now, to work with people that, and going back again, because I sat with Melissa just before you, that we're able to sit with people that understand us better on a cultural level, that even look like us. Like you said, like someone said, like, oh my God, you have curly hair. And it's sad because that means like, that's not a common thing. That's not, you know what I mean? So I love that that's like a thing now. We're able to, I know when I was searching for a therapist, I reached out to you and I was like, I need, I want a Latina and
I got you. I have a whole community of Latinx therapists.
Yes.
So yes, it's not definitely it's evolving.
Yeah, I love that. So we spoke about like the unhealed child traumas a little bit, right?
Yeah, so the patterns, I guess to kind of close off that question a bit, it's again, it shows up because our family, right, our caregivers, that's our first intimate relationship. Again, where we learn trust, responsibility, right, love, all these different, right, emotions.
Like examples of that is like, I would say, for example, as a boy, right, as a child boy, as a kid, your first love is your mother, right, and they learn how to love through their mother. And same thing as, as a girl, you learn your first love is your father and he teaches you that, so I want to talk about a little bit about that, like how that also plays a role in the relationships,
And I wouldn't stick necessarily to that. I think just whoever your caregivers are, no matter the gender, they both play a role, because before we go into like the romantic sexual relationships, right, that our romantic relationships are about, with our first intimate, and I say intimate, right, because intimate doesn't necessarily mean romantic. It's just close, emotionally in proximity, right? Because a baby, a toddler, they need a lot from their caregiver, right? That emotional regulation, which is why, for example, my almost 4-year-old, right? He like tantrum everywhere, right? He went through a biting stage, but that's his way of processing his feelings, but also not knowing how to regulate, because it's my job to teach him, right? If it's saying, hey, like, do you need a hug? And that's something that he's learning now. When he's so upset, he comes to me, he's like, Mommy, I want a hug. And he does the same with Dad, which is so important. So even when you mention like a young boy and moms,
yes,
I believe more in boys having that affection from their dads. Why? Because as they grow up, that is their example, where they learn to, oh, I can be emotional. And emotional, we need to also deconstruct what it means emotional. Emotional is not that you're screaming or crying all the time. Emotional is just being able to say, you know what, I am scared, or I'm confused, or I'm really frustrated because of this. Being able to verbalize that and share it with the people who are important to you, right? But being able to do that, especially with sons and their dads, if they're present, or any other male figures, because what happens is that then when we grow up and we get these men who are not available emotionally, but that's because they didn't see that. I think
their
moms,
fathers.
Yes, moms do enough of that for the most part, right? I think they do, but there's an element that young boys need from fathers, or whoever, again, the males are, because they get to see. There's only so much that a young boy can relate to his mom.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And then vice versa, right? Young girls, yes, there's their dad, but it's also their moms, right? Because they're becoming young women eventually. So they're going to look up to their mom, or again, whoever the motherly figures are in their lives, to like, oh, this is what it's like not only to be a woman, but a woman if you're a color, right? Or this is what I see how my mom or my aunt, right? I love aunties, by the way. Aunties are like the next parallel when it comes to like role models for women. But it's so important to show that, because then there isn't this like, oh, that's only a boy thing or a girl thing. They're both learning from both figures, male and female. Like, oh, we can both do it in this way. We're both learning, right? But particularly for boys, right? I think it's so important. So I'm always like, how can we continue to build community for young boys and men? Because, right, then there's like this machismo, but then there's also like, oh, I can figure everything on my own. And then again, it blows up in a relationship, because that's exactly what I work with couples is men isolating.
Men's health. That's Men's health is another great topic.
Yeah, men's mental health. Yeah, I did a live, I think it was last year or the year before, with a colleague of mine who's a male Latino therapist. And
we are doing better as far as that too, I feel like.
Yeah, things are evolving.
Yeah.
They're catching up, as I say, which is why I tell my women clients who are like dating, I'm like, we have to remember that since the beginning of the times we've been fighting, right?
Yeah, and it's a long journey.
So men are like slowly catching up, right? We're like here, men are like...
I feel like they're being more vulnerable, more open now, and I see it on social media. You know, they're speaking of difficult topics.
That's because there's a lot of men are taking the risk.
Yeah.
So now there's more of this community, right? So I think once you're able to see the safety in building that relationship, it allows you to be like, oh, now I can do it.
I can speak up and yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I could spend hours talking about just that one question.
Yeah. So, communication and conflict. What are common mistakes that couples make?
This is why all the couples I work with or have worked with in the past come. It's like, we want to communicate better. We're always fighting, right? I don't feel heard. I don't feel acknowledged. So there, I'm going to go into a little like psychoeducation, and then I'll answer the question directly. Yeah. So I use a lot of the Gottman method, which if you ever search for Dr. John Gottman and Julie Gottman, they've been researching. So she's a clinician, a therapist, and he's a scientist. So they've been working and searching like, you know, on relationships, but particularly marriages across the board, you know, LGBTQ+, of color, et cetera, for the past like 40 years. They even had something called like the Love Lab, which they like, for I don't know for how long they would have like, and this is back like when they were like tape recordings. Wow. So like I've done 2 of their trainings, and point is that I use a lot of their tools and trainings, right, to work with couples. And they're big on the friendship part, which is something that I brought up earlier. But going back to your question, and I brought them up, is because there's something that they came up with, which is the 4 Horsemen.
Oh, yes.
Of the apocalypse.
You mentioned that,
so with that comes criticism, defense, contempt, and stonewalling, right? I think for the most part, we know what criticism is, right? So, and this, they came up with this to really show like, what is your style of conflict? So when you are entering a difference, a conflict, right, and there's escalation, how are you participating? And that's something that and that's a psychoeducation and learning that I provide couples when they either get into an argument in front of me, but even when they're just discussing, it's like, let's go back to like the recent argument you had, the last one, and let's start to deconstruct. Where do you think you stand in this? And now your partner, yourself. So if I'm, let's say, working with you and your partner, I'll say, Sada, where do you think? You think you're critical? Do you think you're being defensive? Do you think you're being contemptuous or stonewalling? And I'll share like what each mean.
Yes.
So criticism is usually like you come in like blaming. Right? You're upset for whatever reason, right? There's a concern, which you have every right to be, but you come in with criticism and blaming. So it's a lot of blaming language, is a lot of criticism.
So kind of putting it back on them.
You're throwing it on them. Mm-hmm. Although, yeah, they did something, but usually it comes out in a way that it's like, it's the entire thing is your fault. So what happens when you come to anyone like that, or when you're received with that, you get defensive, which is the second one, the second horseman, defense. We are unable to take responsibility. We try to justify and explain why this happened, right? We might get a bit hostile. And then what happens with that is, and some of us fall, maybe we can participate in all 4 of them, some only a few. But then the third, contempt, is usually when we are sarcastic, when there's like eye rolling, which I know we can be famous for as women, right? Especially as Latinas, right? We can be...
Attitude comes with the package.
Yes. Right? Maybe screaming or yelling. So contempt is any like really heightened, right? Your tone and your behavior, right? And then stonewalling, that's when we retrieve. And I usually, women do this too, but I usually see more men.
That's a men thing. What is it called? The silent treatment, followed by the silent treatment too, because they don't even know how to express their feelings and they just shut down and, you know.
But they're also, so let's say if you're the one who's more critical and more outward, stonewalling is the same thing, it's just happening internally. So someone who stonewalls and retrieves and withdraws, they're fuming too, but they're more internal.
Ah, I see.
And again, all of these
the other person
have
is
a
just
background.
vocal about it.
Exactly. So they think that's why especially when I work with heterosexual couples, they're like, oh, she's just better at expressing. No. You're both trying to maybe relay the same message. Your behaviors to that are just different. She's just more outward
Key
and
of
you're
communication.
more inward. Yes.
And
they can both be harmful, right? And we can kind of deconstruct that part. But going back to the four horsemen, right? The stonewalling is a withdrawing, which means I go inward and internally there's a huge, it's a chaos. But this is how I feel safe. While maybe for the person who's critical or defense, they feel safe or I need to protect myself, so I need to be outward. So basically, it's fulfilling the same need, like for yourself. Yeah. It just looks different. So then what happens is that
makes so much sense.
We kind of flip-flop, right? Sometimes between all of them. And I'll ask, again, the couple that I'm working with, I'm like, where do you think you fall? Right? Do you think you are more critical? Are you defensive? Are you contemptuous? Or do you stonewall? And usually, right?
Do they recognize it
immediately?
Yes.
And they start laughing.
They're aware.
Of course. And I'm like, I'm not here, right? And I am
But sometimes that's what we need you guys for. To kind of tell us, like, sometimes you'll just ask us and we'll just answer ourselves and we're just like, oh, Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you guys help us unpack all that stuff. And see.
Yeah. And it's important to then learn, right? So then as we go through that and then teach, like, what else was the story behind this? So then there are other interventions from the same. And interventions are just like exercises, let's say, just to simplify the terms, that I guide couples through. It's like, okay, now that we know this is how you both fight.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been working because you're doing the same thing and you keep getting into the same fight, no matter what the topic is, we keep getting. Can we start to deconstruct that and learn what's the story, what's the history? So then there are some exercises, which is like speaker and listener. So I'll have, let's say you and your partner, I'll give each of you. So I work with couples for 90 minutes, an hour and a half.
Oh.
So depending on how it goes, we might spend the whole 90 minutes with you or with your partner, or we're able to break it up. But I say that is because...
So you do like 30 minutes, and then 30 together, like 30 individual, or...
No, I have them together. Yeah,
okay.
I'll sometimes do individual sessions, depending. Yeah. But I'll have them together and I'll do the speaker and listener, which is literally what it is. Like, one partner is the speaker, which means as that person is speaking, the other person cannot say anything. I tell them, grab a notebook and a pen. I need you to take notes on what you're hearing, because they are practicing active listening. We all are great listeners, but we're not.
No, yeah, I'm
right. We listen usually to respond, right? To say why that's not okay or that's not right.
It's like reactive.
Exactly.
Reactive,
so I have them do that so they can really hear what the person is saying. And with the speaker, I guide them saying, I need you to name the feelings, right? Most folks, especially if you haven't done therapy or at least some sort of emotional work, you can't really identify. So I have my worksheets and everything that I share. And I'm like, out of this wheel of feelings, which ones can you identify with, right? So I feel about, and what do I need? That's literally like the thing that I go through with them. So the speaker is going to say how they feel about whatever the argument was about, and then what they needed from that person. And usually the need is like, I just needed you to hear me out, right? To understand how come I felt this way. And then I'm like, is there any history behind this? And usually for the most part, each of them can say, yeah, I really felt mad, which is why I yelled at you, because this is something my mom did all the time to me, right? Or this is something that,
childhood.
Or in my old relationship, right? Like in my previous relationship. And then once that happens, the listener cannot give their own thoughts. That's why they're taking notes. The listener is going to paraphrase. So what did your partner just say about their feelings? Oh, she voiced that she felt disappointed. She felt inadequate, right? So they have that, kind of go through all of that. And then if they have any questions to get more clarification, I say, is there any questions? So they do that. And I try to do that mostly in every session, one to practice, and then say, how can you practice in between sessions where you're not in front of me? Because that's such a good practice to really learn, especially when there's difference, because you're always going to have differences.
Yeah, of course.
No matter what, right?
Yeah, we're raised in two different households, and now we're trying to combine these values and together, and it's like now I have to understand your language, you have to understand mine.
And you said something value. So in those conversations, we go deeper, and it's like, how come you're in this position? What values or beliefs, right, are under this? What childhood history or family history, cultural history might be involved? So then you're able to then learn from your partner, oh, he's not just staying quiet, right? Or he's not just saying this because of this. There's a history. So then what happens? You're able to be empathetic and understanding, and then you can acknowledge, which is what we ultimately want.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So again, that practice is so important. And again, I do it as mostly all sessions, I would say. And then I give homework, right, for couples to do in between. But then I continue to bring up the 4 horsemen, because then there's the antidote, right? Like, instead of being critical, the antidote to that is a gentle startup. You can be frustrated, but instead of coming in hot, right? Can you realize, are you in the position to say anything? And if you're too heated, maybe wait until you're like a little bit more chilled and then bring up the concern. Instead of getting defensive, can you acknowledge where you messed up, right? Can you take responsibility? Instead of getting hostile, can you acknowledge that this is the person that you respect and you love, right? Which is the friendship part. Right? Can you know that maybe this is a situation that you dislike, but ultimately you really care about this person? And then instead of stonewalling, right, retrieving, can you acknowledge when you're maybe, and this is such a practice, especially when it just happens so naturally for many folks, can you start to notice when that's happening and then self-soothe, right? Any type of, it's like, let me take a break, right? Let me go drink something. Let me go distract myself, so then we can come back to the conversation.
Yeah.
So then these practices, one, it's something new. None of us were taught how to do any of this.
No, I mean, absolutely not.
So whenever a couple's like, oh, but I just had a session on Friday, and it's like, oh, it's been a year and like 2, I think in August I made a year that I've been working with them. And like, how come we keep going into this? I'm like, bro, you guys are like in your late 30s. Which means you've been functioning in this way most of your life.
Yeah,
so you cannot expect
to unlearn that. It's not gonna take a few months. It's gonna take practice. It's gonna take your partner also, putting in that same energy and collectively. Now, is that? I guess, right? Do you think that 2 people can heal collectively, or they should be healing individually?
I believe in both ends. Because we can be doing the work together.
But sometimes one person is not putting that same energy as you are. So is that, does that contribute to your healing too at the same time? Like, for me, I feel like that's when it becomes
the pace discrepancy, right? When there is a discrepancy in the pace that we're moving. And this is, right, in the context of healing that you're sharing.
Like, you're moving this way, and then your partner is kind of like barely behind you.
And can we talk about that? Because I do see that, right? And I hear it all the time sometimes where, there's time, but then what is the individual work that you're doing? So I usually suggest and I refer my couples to individual spaces, because I'm like, how can you go deeper into this conversation? Because my client is a relationship. Again, I'll do individuals here and there to support, but how can you go deeper? Because there's something here that, yes, we can continue working on, but in your own individual space without like other distractions, it allows you to explore more and really process what you need to process.
Yeah.
In terms of the pacing, I don't like to compare, because again, like anything else in life, two people are going to do different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But is there a space to talk about it? So it goes back to communication, right? If I'm frustrated because I am jogging and you're walking fast, right? Like, we're moving.
Yeah.
As long as we're moving, it's okay, right? But if I'm frustrated because, again, I'm jogging and you're like, speed walking, then can we talk about it? But then I ask, especially when a couple brings it up to me, one of the partners, what's happening? Like, what's triggering feeling maybe frustrated, right?
Yeah.
Or impatient right now.
It's not what you expected it to be by now, but there is
Expectations too,
Yeah.
right? What are your expectations of
Yeah.
where you're supposed to be? And again, is an expectation because you also, and this is where I bring the bigger systems. We live in a society that we want
everything just
fast, right?
Yeah,
I order something now, y ahorita es in my house, right?
Well, they got us, they got us accustomed to that. Amazon doesn't help.
Exactly. And literally all of these things, we don't think they connect, but they do, because then we kind of use that and then we want to put it in our areas of life. Oh, I just applied to the job. How come they didn't answer me? Oh, I just text, this guy that I've been dating. How come he hasn't answered me, right? Or
we want results.
And as long as we're dealing with human beings, we need to be patient. We need to practice, which again, it's a practice because we live in a society, in a world that is so fast paced and we think everything is on the same wavelength, which goes back to like the expectations and what is triggering this. And can we talk about it? Because then maybe that's an opportunity for you to really learn how come maybe your partner is quote unquote 5 steps behind. And that goes back to the emotional safety. Can I share with you the struggles that I'm having, even being maybe present in our therapy because I feel X, Y, and Z, right? Or there's a part of me that's like, doesn't want to because that's not manly. Like, I don't know, right?
That's not me being in my masculine energy, which is another whole.
But I say that is because if we were to listen to our feelings and be curious, this world will be a whole different world. Versus listening to them and then just being reactive, right?
Yeah.
If I feel frustrated, doesn't mean I have to act upon it. What is creating
We have a lot
this?
of that, even like just in our culture as Latinas, we have a lot of that reactive behavior. All of us, I feel like.
I mean, yeah, I'm not perfect. I'm a therapist and I still like... right? Like I still yell
we
because
have moments where we lose it.
And that's the beauty of being human, right? And it goes back to creating that space. Just because you're working on yourself doesn't mean you're not going to go back to bad patterns or behaviors.
Just being aware of it, I think it's fine.
You become aware and then you reset.
Yeah.
Versus staying in it.
I see it in myself. Like I'll be. I used to be very reactive, and I stopped that. I've worked on that a lot, and now even the moments I already know. Okay, yeah, no, that was not okay. Wherein other times I would just be reactive and like it is what it is, But now I'm just
how I am.
Yeah, and now it's like no, I feel bad about it. Now I'm just like, oh damn, like I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So.
And then you reset if that's with someone, right? Like for me, I've really learned to apologize to my kids. I'm sure our parents never did that to us.
Oh my God, that is something that I do practice with my children. Even when I feel like, again, going back to what I said, being reactive, like just yelling. Then I'll turn around and I'll have my moment to gather my thoughts. And then I'll go back and I'm like, I'm sorry, Mom is just very frustrated. She has a lot of work and you guys are doing X, Y, Z. So creating that safe space for them to understand that I'm Mom and you listen to me, but also Mom also makes mistakes, And so I've never had that. Like my mom would just, the way that our parents used to do it, they'll like yell at us and like maybe even hit us. And then they'll come like, are you hungry?
But even that...
That's how they would apologize. And like as a child, that's not... We go into the world not expecting apologies from people.
Yeah. Or again, taking responsibility, because it's not so much the apology, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's more the responsibility and acknowledging that was hurtful. Because again, all we want is validation. You can say, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry is not going to cut it. What really cuts it is when you're able to say, yeah, you know what? I can see how that was hurtful.
Yes.
Even when we say it to our kids, right? Like, I'm sorry, Mommy has a lot, but actually that wasn't okay. So I say, I'm like, it wasn't okay for me to scream, because then I'm going to go ahead and tell my son that he can't be screaming. But it's like, but I'm doing it, right? So it's hard. But even when you're saying about like our parents, yes, the food part, but I think that's something that I've been learning and even recognizing, and like a lot of the forgiveness work that I've been doing with my parents is that is their way to apologize, because that's all they know. So like, how can we still validate that? Even though...
In return, even in that space.
Yes, as adults.
Because then that's kind of like for example, with me, like in my healing journey, I felt like my mom was healing with me too.
Yeah.
So...
Those little parts of your healing, especially if you can now have the conversation with
and
your
now I understand her on a deeper level too, and I can validate her feelings. She might not necessarily still understand, how things work because she hasn't been through therapy, but I feel like she's feeling the change. She's feeling how it's been a positive impact even on her, even without her having to go to therapy. Because even if she's giving me that energy, I'm validating her feelings, and then it changes her behavior towards me. So it still somewhat works,
Just going back to relationships, that's a perfect example that not two people have to be working on themselves. As long as one person decides to create a change, it impacts the whole system. That's why I love how I was trained, because it only takes one part of the sum to create a change. The change, it might not be, in this case, it's positive, right? It might not be positive, right? I don't want to talk about it always being good because it might be negative.
In what sense you mean?
Yeah, and in the sense that someone can change, right, in a relationship, which means the other person who's participating has to change too, but they might not change in a positive way, which means then that's also information for you to know, do I stay in this relationship or not, right? But again, change doesn't always mean we have to do it together, but if one person doing it in the context, like
it can impact.
Your mom, it can impact, because now that person has to move differently.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
Oh, Isauda's now setting limits. She's actually saying that she's no longer going to go, I don't know, drive 2 hours to go see you, that you have to meet her halfway.
Yeah.
It's either you meet her halfway or you don't see her.
Yeah.
Right? So there's still the change there. So that's why I say that, particularly when it comes to our parents, that there's a shift that they're able to see. And I think it's an invitation for them to see it as best as they can. And then it just changes our relationship with them too.
Yeah. And then, of course, our parents are, well, I don't know if your parents, but my parents are around my children. So I also don't want the work that I'm doing with them, and then for her to trickle that in. And it's like, no. Wait a minute. Like, I'll work with you, with my mother, so that when we're teaching our children, we're speaking the same languages, because it's like, I'm fixing one thing one side, and then she might be por el otro lado,
And that's a whole other podcast episode of grandparents, because we forget there are mothers,
which and I'm
but
grateful
then they're
for,
grandparents,
and I'm grateful for that, because I think it's important for their children to be raised around their grandparents too. But it's also with me, doing the work, I just want to make sure that the work that I'm doing is not going to be,
Yeah, it's so messy. That's why being human is beautiful, messy, and everything in between. But I completely understand.
That's the beauty of being human. I want to talk about love and hustle connection, because, this is Love, Heal, Hustle. How does being in a healthy relationship impact someone's ability to succeed in business and in their personal goals?
So much. Again, it goes back to the friendship, right? When you generally care for someone, you're going to support their goals, right? You're going to support, if that's personal, if that's business, you're going to chime in where you can, right? And I say this, and I can use a little bit of my example of, I started my therapy practice 2.5 years ago, which means my son's almost 4. He was 1.5. We got married that year. That 2023 was a lot, right?
Yeah.
Toddler, marriage, right? Started my practice. And I'm a Sagittarius, which means I'm a venturous. I'm not scared to take risks. I mean, I was going to say I'm not scared, but I am scared.
You're a traveler,
Yes.
And you went by yourself. I love that.
I'm scared, but there's always a part of me that's like, I got you.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to figure it out, which goes back to us being, right, first generation, right? Our parents came to this country. My mom didn't speak English, right? 5th grade level education, and she was able to make it here. Why not? In whatever I can with the resources that I have. But point is, going back to the question, my husband ended up taking a lot of more of the home responsibilities. He works a full-time job, everything. But because he's been doing his work for 15 years, he's coasting.
Okay.
Which again, I'm like,
because for him, it's riding a bike now, probably.
Yeah.
His job, yeah.
And I want him to do more he can.
Yeah.
But this grounded me because I'm constantly let's go.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm we cannot be always running. Sometimes we have to take a breath and walk.
Right, of course, yeah.
So he's right now, babe, you're growing your business, which means you have a lot on your plate. And we have 2 kids. We have things to we have other responsibilities. I'm here supporting you, so I'm taking away some of the stressors and
I love
the
that.
tedious things, right? Like he cooks dinner most of the week.
Oh.
He takes the kids to school. He picks them up for the most part. 1 day or 2, maybe a week, I'll go. Like he does a lot of that. So I can
love
focus
that. Yeah,
on mine
you have a
because
supportive partner.
exactly. And that's an example of like,
and your success is his success because he is your partner.
this is for us. Like,
So
it's
he
not
understands
for me,
that,
of
right?
course.
You know?
And then he's like, va a llegar un punto where then it's going to be...
Flip side.
Yeah, where I'm kind of like steady because I'm good. And then it's going to be me, right?
And I think that's so important in relationships when you understand that balance that, yeah, you know, sometimes I might have to pick up the slack, you know, to let you shine. And then sometimes it may be vice versa. And just having that like safety to know that you're able to do that without being criticized or judged by it.
And without your like manhood being like
taken away,
because we always, I mean, since the beginning of times, how many women don't quit their passions, right, to support their man?
Always. I mean,
right?
that's a norm.
Exactly.
It's changing now, you know.
Yeah. So, and I'm using that like my lived experience with that is because that really shows when you have a supportive partner to support your dreams, in this case, my business, but then also my personal. Like I went to Portugal to visit my friend for my birthday last year in November for 2 weeks. At first, I'm like, oh my God, like,
wow,
what is my mom going to think?
Yeah. Pablo's still with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, I brought my mom over from DR.
Okay.
So she was helping. So it's not like he was by himself, but he was like, yeah, why not?
Oh.
Like, we've built that relationship again. We've been together for 16 years. So this is not like an early relationship.
We've worked together for, I know you guys been together.
Our patches.
Yeah.
So this is not easy.
We all have,
But as long as we work and again, we take responsibility and we still have fun in the process, I think any relationship can be sustainable. But not everyone's willing to go through those hard patches, right? But again, it's important to have, right, those tools that we've been discussing throughout our time together here today, because that's then going to bleed into anything you want to do. If that's individual, if that's professionally, like you're going to be able to do that. But if you have a partner who, right, doesn't want to support in any way, right? Or there's just too much stress all the time, it's going to be much harder to do it. And of course, I have other, like I mentioned my mom, I have great friends, like I have my own therapist. Like it's not only him because I don't expect him to be all, like I have pockets of people who also support me in that way. And I've been able to get to where I'm at in my individual journey as just a woman in general, but then also as a mom, as a partner, and as a businesswoman. I said businesswoman.
I love that. That sounds so beautiful. I love all that.
Because of the people around me, but I've also have searched for them. So it's not like they've just been in my life because I'm a community.
And you've also put in the work too.
Yes.
You know, so I love that. Sheila, thank you so much for dropping your gems today on the show and joining me.
Of course. And again, if anyone is interested in looking into either starting the journey or even wanting to just work with me or work with a therapist who is of color or Latina, reach out, which is, connect with Sheila on Instagram, or if not, visit my website, which is compasiontherapy.com. Compasión is with one S, like compassion, but with one S.
I love it.
And there you can get more information of like my relationship therapy, individual. And then I'm also offering now couples therapy intensives, which is... a lot of couples are busy and they sometimes don't have time to commit to weekly sessions. I'm offering like a 3-hour or a 6-hour intensive, which is literally working with me for 3 hours or for 6 hours. And we can break up the 6 hours.
In a month or like...
back to back. So let's say if you want to work 6 hours, it can be like a Saturday and Sunday where we break it up in 3 hours and really dive into like whatever the thing is. If it's really the communication tools, if it's infidelity, if it's, a life transition, because in between sessions, sometimes, life is happening.
Yeah.
Right?
No, for me, like I can't, like, I couldn't do the weekly sessions anymore.
Yeah. So even if it's like...
Then I switch it to bi-weekly, whatever works.
So then it allows you to really like focus structured time to focus on this thing without distractions, or at least minimal distractions, and really get the results for the most part that you want. So it's just something new that I'm starting.
Perfect.
But yeah, thank you for your time.
Of course. It was great to have you on the show.
Of course.
That's all. You're not just surviving, you're rewriting the rules. If this spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Keep loving, keep healing, and don't you ever stop hustling. This is Love, Heal, Hustle, and your story's just getting started. Tap follow, hit subscribe, and listen on every major platform.